Hello, everybody. Welcome back to our Pali class. This is our 8th class already, and so, of course, once again, on behalf of the Buddhist Association of the United States, the Chuanyen Monastery in Carmel, New York, and the Wuju Memorial Library, I'm Stephen Sas, and I'm very happy to be with you here once again for more Pali study. This special summer intensive. We have this wonderful opportunity at this scary time in our lives to use it well by studying Pali. And so let's launch right into our new material, or perhaps our review material. I'll share my screen. And I think you might have seen this a few moments ago. This, as you probably have surmised already, this is the Tipitaka.org website. And this is the Anguttara Nikaya, often translated as the Numerical Discourses. And our readings today from the Ger and Karuna Tilaka textbook comes from the Book of Ones, which in Pali is called the Ekakanipata, and Pali is the text. And so here we see the beginning of the book. We have our homage to the Buddha right at the top. We have the name of the Nikaya. Notice, interestingly, it's in the nominative. Then we have Book of Ones, Ekakanipata Pali. And the name of this chapter, which is actually in our further readings, the Rupadi Vaggo. So Rupa is material form. The suffix adi has the sense of and so on, etc. So this is the chapter on form and so on. And it's interesting to me that it does actually start with a little bit of sort of historical story, which I thought it might be nice to look at briefly because we haven't looked too much at sort of storytelling Pali. We've been very much involved with dhammas and mind. So I thought we'd just look at these 3 sentences quickly just for fun. And I'm sure you'll recognize the first 3 words. Evang me sutang. Thus I have heard. In fact, Evang me sutang, it literally is thus by me heard. It's a passive construction. But as I've mentioned, in English, we try to avoid very often passive constructions. We put them more in the active voice. So, thus I have heard, or thus was heard by me. Ekang samayang bhagava savatyang viharati jetavane anatapindikasa arame. So here we have ekang samayang, at one time. A samaya is an occasion or a time, and often in Pali, time periods are expressed in the accusative case. So at one time, Bhagava, the Blessed One. So this is the Bhagavant. This is for that group of nouns. It is the nominative case with the long A. And we have the verb viharati, which I'm sure you recognize now from Pali Primer, dwelling at Savati in the accusative. So viharati is interesting because viharati is actually a present tense verb. But of course we're not talking about the present tense. Sadly, we can't go to Savati today and find the Buddha. But in Pali, often the past is expressed using the present tense. I believe this is called sometimes the historical present. So it's a present tense, but obviously used to express events that have taken place already. So the Buddha was dwelling at Savati. Savati was the big city in the kingdom of Kosala. It's probably the place most mentioned as a place in the suttas. And there's more information. Jetavane anatapindikasa arame. So this is a locative. Jeta's grove, Jeta and Vana is a grove, and Arame is in the park of genitive Anathapindika, a great lay benefactor of the Buddha. So I hope you recognize your locatives and genitive. And then we have Tatrako Bhagava Bhikkhu Amantesi. Then the Blessed One addressed the monks. Bhikkhavo ti. And so this is another form of vocative plural, monks, or O monks. Badante ti te bhikkhu bhagavato pacha sosung. Bante, those monks replied to the Blessed One. And so once again we have this data of bhagavato, to the Blessed One. Bhagava etadavocha. The Blessed One said this. And then we launch into our sutta. But we're going to come back to this in just a moment, so we're not going to quite yet come to it. I'd like to do just a little bit of review from our initial readings to make sure we're all squared away and there are no questions about what has happened so far. And so I thought maybe we'd have a look one more time at one of these earlier ones, perhaps number 301, because it has the va and the cha. And so we spoke a bit about how the words va, or, and the word cha, and, are used in Pali, and how they're used from the perspective of an English language speaker a bit differently, and it could be a little bit challenging at first to wrap one's head around the syntax, but I assure you, one gets used to it, and no need to worry. And so I'll read this first quickly. Nahang bhikkhave anyang ekadamang pi samanupasame yena anupanava akusala dhamma nupajanti upanava akusala dhamma parihayanti yataidang bhikkhave samaditi kasa bhikkhave anupana cheva akusala dhamma nupajanti upanacha akusala dhamma parihayanti ti. And so we can start at the beginning. Nahang, which is the negator word na, plus joined together with the personal pronoun I, ahang, nahang. We go to the verb, samanupasami, perceive is how we've been rendering that word, perceive. Ekadamangpi. I should mention perhaps, sometimes we see this printed out a little differently. We see it with a space, and then this nasal M looks like this one. And that is exactly the same. They're pronounced exactly the same. The only difference is that if these two words are joined together, the nasal moves in value and then takes on the labial nasal, damang pi. That is just simply for ease of pronunciation. So it is true, or it is certainly the case, that this is an accusative and it's being matched with anyang. I don't perceive any other one thing, or not another thing, by which unarisen, unwholesome dhammas do not arise, or, and so notice here this first va is, there's no need to translate it here, and the second va is not coming exactly where I would expect it from an English perspective, because in Pali it's coming between the two adjectives which are modifying dhamma. Or arisen, unwholesome dhammas decrease, namely right view. Okay, and now for our second sentence of this, perhaps we'll even start with the what might be thought of as the grammatical subject of this sentence, the nominative plural, dhammas being modified or described with these two words, anupana and akusala. So unarisen and unwholesome dhammas, indeed, that's the cheva, do not arise, and, so I've moved this cha over, arisen and unwholesome dhammas decrease. And then we can perhaps go all the way back here to our first word, for a one of right view. And so I hope that's clear, or clearer, in terms of the usages of cha and va and how they line up, how it all sort of starts to click together. We start getting our Pali syntax eyes working well. And then we had our 4 right strivings. This is from a different section of the same part of Anguttara Nikaya. So we have these 4 right efforts, or the 4 right strivings. And energy is a big one of them. As you probably know, energy is one of the 5 indriya, or in Pali indriyani, because it's a neuter plural, panchindriyani. What are the 5? Well, there's faith, saddha, sometimes translated as confidence, energy, that's our virya, mindfulness, sati, concentration, that's samadhi, and wisdom, panya. So all very good words to know. And this group of 4 is the 4 right efforts, and it's found also in the big group of dhammas called the bodhipakya dhamma. That is the factors of enlightenment. The word bodhipakya is an interesting word. Bodhi, as you probably know, has the sense of enlightenment or awakening. And the word pakya, can have the sense of a wing, like a wing of a bird, but it really more literally means on the side of, or related to enlightenment. But because it could be referring to the wings of a bird, or a wing of a bird, sometimes you see this a little bit loosely translated as the wings of awakening, and that's the reason. And so, taking a look at this, bhikkhu anupananam papakanam akusalanam dhammam anupadaya chandang janeti. We'll stop there for a sec. So a monk, but of course it's any practitioner, generates desire, chanda, for the non-arising, that is our dative, and then we have our 4 genitive plurals, unarisen, evil, unwholesome dhammas. So they're all going with dhammanam. And as well, this person, vayamati, so that is, he strives, or he endeavors. Viryam arabati, he generates energy. Chittang paganhati, he applies the mind. And padahati, which as we said has a very close meaning to vayamati, so also endeavors or strives. I wanted to mention something interesting about the second one, which is this word pahana, which is found, as you know, in the dative case, pahanaya. So pahanang, the neuter noun, is related directly to a verb that we've covered, a very common and very important verb, pajanati. So pajanati is to abandon, to set aside, to give up. Kind of an important concept in Buddhism, I would say. Giving up, letting go. So pahana is like the noun version, the abandoning, the giving up. And here it is in the dative. So in this second one, the monk generates the desire for the abandonment of unarisen, evil, unwholesome dhammas. And the third one is very similar. We don't even have to do it. And then maybe we'll have another look at the fourth one. I put in here, there's two versions of it because I try to annotate it closely with colors. I sometimes wonder if my annotations make it less clear and rather than more clear, but I'll give it a try. And so first I'll read this, just the words of the actual sutta. Bhikkhu upananang kusalanang dhammanang titya asamosaya biyo bhavaya vipulaya bhavanaya paripurya chandang janiti vayamati viryamarabati chittang paganhati padati. So here, a bit longer, we have, what's interesting is we have nouns that are from different groups, and so they're taking their respective case endings from that group. And so here, a monk generates desire so these are all dative. So the first one is the word titi, which is directly related to the word titati, which has the literal sense of to stand, to remain. So this is perhaps the persistence for the persistence. And so this is a short I feminine noun. It's taking the ya suffix as the I feminine nouns do. Then we have asamosaya. And so this is not a feminine noun. This is a masculine short A. That's what my M is, masculine short A, for the non-confusion. So notice here it's taking a different kind of dative ending, aya, which we recognize. And then we have another one, it's a compound, bio bhavaya. And so here the compound is of bio, which means greater, and bhava, which means a state. So a state of greater, which means an increase. So for the increase, this is another masculine short A. Thus we have the aya suffix. And then we have the vepulaya. That is the fullness. Vepula has a sense of fullness or abundance. This is a neuter noun. NT is neuter. Also taking aya. And here's one that they've kind of sneakily stuck in, which perhaps you notice doesn't really fit with what you might have learned so far, because bhavana, which is a common word, is actually a feminine long A noun, which is coming shortly in chapter 2. We haven't officially had it yet. But bhavana, which means cultivation, it also can take another sense of just meditation. But here I think it's cultivation. So the feminine long A take the aya for the cultivation, and here paripurya for the fulfillment or the completion. It's related to the verb pureti, to fill up. And that is another short I feminine. So it has the ya. So I wanted to point out the important concept that nouns must take this ending, the case endings, from the group from which they come. They don't, even though they might be adjacent to each other in a sentence, they don't blend together really. They still stick to their group in terms of the case endings they take. And the big example I've been giving for that concept to illustrate is the homage to the Buddha, Namo Tassa. So tassa, that is a dative, and sama sambuddhassa is also a dative that you recognize, sa. But bhagavato and arahato are from a different group, and so that's why they have that to. So there they are, standing next to each other with their respective case ending from their group. Okay. So that's a little bit of a review of the initial readings. And I'll ask now quickly if there are any questions about anything in the Ger and Karunatilaka initial before we leave them. This is your chance to ask before we move on, if there's anything that I was unable to explain clearly. Okay, I think we have one hand from Hitet.
Thank you, Stephen.
Yes.
I have one confusion. You
Okay.
just explained about titiya.
Yes.
I was confused that with having stood.
Having stood. No, it is not an absolutive. It's a
Okay.
dative. So the ya suffix there, that it can be confusing, but the word is titi. Like here, if you see on my screen, I've highlighted it and it's in blue.
Yeah.
And that's the short I. And so it takes this ya suffix to make a dative. So for the persistence. Okay? Does that answer your question? Good.
Yes,
All
yes,
right.
thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, I don't see any more questions. So that means,
I have 2 questions.
Okay. Hang on. Let me take Linda's question, Diane, then I'll come right to you. Okay, hold on. Okay, Linda, if you can unmute.
Sorry. Hi, Stephen.
Hi.
Hi, Stephen. My question to you is see the number 4, the one on the screen.
Yes.
After the Chandan Janeti, and
Yes.
then you have Vayamati,
Yes.
Virya, and so on.
Yes.
Now you translated that part from Vayamati and so on. You said he strives and he, so on. But how do you know that you have put the word he there?
I guess it's not necessary. I mean, it doesn't have to be that way. And I seem to remember that in the John Kelly translation, he does it slightly differently. But I'm taking these as independent clauses. And of course, there is a person always built into the verb, vayamati. It literally means he strives, or it strives, or she strives, right? But I take that to be referring back to the subject of this entire sentence, which is bhikkhu.
Now the semicolon before the Vayamati, is it there like in Pali text, or was it added?
If it's in the Sixth Council, maybe you're asking? I don't know.
Yes.
I would have to look.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
In general, Pali text in the sutta, is it in the form of the semicolon or not?
It could have it, but I would have to check this instance.
Oh,
I don't know exactly, but this is how I take the meeting. But I think, again, if you want, you can look at the John Kelly translation, and then he might have it slightly differently, but I at least like to think that the meaning of it is the same. Okay?
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, Diane?
There was a question about anupadaya. Isn't it dative? I thought it was dative, but someone says, no, it is the accusative.
Where are we?
394.7. The one
Wait, hang on a second. 394. Yeah, dative. Did I say something else?
No, you didn't say anything at all. Someone asked, isn't it dative? I thought it was dative. Someone thought it wasn't dative, and I don't want to steer anybody wrong. I've messed up so many times, Stephen.
So here, just to review quickly, a monk generates desire anupadaya. So for the non-arising. So the for, that English word, is telling us, of course we are working backwards, but it is dative. And the rest are what case? The other 4 words.
Genitive plural.
Genitive plural. Good.
Okay, then the other question was, apparently it's also on, okay, it's still on 394-7. Why does damanam have a genitive ending when it functions like an accusative, a noun?
Okay.
Question.
Okay, the word damanang is the word that these 3 adjectives are going with. So we could just simply look at these 2. And he generates, so the object of the verb janeti, he generates, is here, chanda, chandang, in the accusative singular. That is the direct object of the verb. Then we have this dative for the non-arising of dhammas. So it's not a direct object, it's an indirect case. Or we could say for dhammas apostrophe s unarising, and that maybe looks a little more genitive. But it is not a direct object. He's not directly generating desire for dhammas, although it might seem that way, but he's really generating desire for the non-arising or of dhammas. And so it's expressed in a little more complicated way. But I can assure you that anang is a genitive plural. It is not the direct object. It is an indirect object. Does that answer your question?
Well, it answers mine. I hope
Okay.
it answers theirs.
Okay, good.
And someone else has said, Bhikkhave is evocative. It seems to have an E suffix instead of the A, or an A, long A suffix. I wonder how it declined.
It's a good question. So bhikkhu, in the vocative plural, in a sort of technical sense, would probably have the long U. Bhikkhu, vocative plural, which would be the same as the nominative plural. But there are these sort of non-standard case forms. We saw two already today, bhikkhave, and at the beginning of this session we saw bhikkhavo. So those are two options also for the vocative plural of bhikkhu. Probably those two are much more common than bhikkhu with the long U. And if you look at the paradigm table in chapter 2 of Ger, where the masculine you nouns are listed, you will see this all there.
One last question on pronunciation.
Okay.
Someone keeps pronouncing V like a W. Is that correct?
It can be. Yes, it's certainly an option. I maybe should have said, like maybe days, weeks ago, that there is no absolute official pronunciation of Pali. Pali has regional accents like any other language. Ladies and gentlemen from India will not pronounce every word I do in English the same way. That is not a good or bad thing. It is just simply a regional difference. Even in parts of America, we pronounce things differently. And so, yes, the V sound, which I'm just pronouncing sort of like in a Western V, could have that softer sound. Particularly, I've noticed it in Southeast Asia, Thailand and Sri Lanka. That's absolutely right. No problem. I would wonder if there are any Bengali speakers here, how they would pronounce it, because I've been told that Bengali is the living language the most close to Pali. So if there is a native Bengali speaker, you can tell us how you might pronounce it. But of course, the answer is that there's no absolute correct way. Okay, are there any other questions?
That's all. Thank you very much.
Okay, you're welcome. Okay, so I think we can move on to further readings. And we actually did start on it already. I'll do the first one. Bhikkhave, by the way. So this is our vocative plural for the bhikkhu. Nahang bhikkhave anyang ekadamangpi samanupasami yo evang sadamassa samosaya antaradanaya sangvatati yataidang bhikkhave pamado. Pamado bhikkhave sadamassa samosaya antaradanaya sangvatati. And so here, a rather similar syntax. I do not, monks, perceive any other one thing. So somehow inconsistently I might point out that I have ekadamangpi here as a compound, and ekadamangpi here as not a compound. Either one is fine. I think perhaps in the Sixth Council edition they have it one way, and in Ger and Kudantilika they have it another way. As I've said, both are fine. Both should be pronounced the same way, and it's just a question of whether certain words should be stuck together or not. And as I've said, if they are stuck together, the nasal moves to a different kind of nasal. So I do not perceive any other other thing, nothing else, that which thus leads to, and then we have two datives, antradanaya, the disappearance, and samosaya, the confusion. This word samosa is related to the word moha, of the good or the true Dhamma, sad Dhamma, genitive. Namely, yataidang, O monks, pamado. And so here, pamado is the negative one, even though it is the not negated form. I know it's a little confusing, but pamado is what we do not want. Pamado is bad. Pamada is carelessness, heedlessness. You might remember or know that one of the very last things the Buddha told his disciples as he was dying was apamadena sampadeta. Strive on heedfully. Appamada, heedful. Be heedful. Be aware of what you're doing. But here it's pamada. So that is heedlessness, no heed. And so pamada, heedlessness, monks, leads to the disappearance and the confusion of the true doctrine, of the true Dhamma, sad Dhamma. Okay, let's look at another one. It's similar. Perhaps we will ask for a volunteer. Maybe somebody would like to do this. It's always nice to hear other people read. If you would like to do this one, you can raise your hand. Okay, we have Irene.
Good morning, Stephen.
Hi, thank you for volunteering.
Now,
So-
I had to read first.
I'm sorry?
I'm supposed to read the
Yes,
sentence.
please read, sorry.
Ahang bhikkhave anyang ekadamangpi samanupasami yo evang sadamassa titiya asamo saya anantaradanaya samvatati yataridang bhikkhave apamado. Apamado bhikkhave sadammassa titiya asamosaya anantaradanaya samvatati atati.
Very nice. What does it mean in English?
I do not, O monks, bhikkhave, anyang ekadamampi, samanupasami, perceive any one thing, anyang ekadamang, yo evang, that thus, that leads to
Very good.
samosaya, the non-confusion and
Okay.
non-disappearance, anataradhanaya,
But don't forget titya.
or the persistence
Good.
of non-confusion and non-disappearance of the true doctrine.
Mm-hmm.
Namely apamado, heedfulness.
Good.
Apamado bhikkhave, heedfulness, O monks. That's the true doctrine. Samvatiti leads to
Mm-hmm.
the persistence, patitya, of asamosaya, non-confusion and non-disappearance of the true Dhamma.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Great job.
Thank you.
Okay. So that is that one. And we have one with, is there someone who'd like to do the one with Kosaja? Okay, we have Hui Lin. Yes, I
Okay.
think.
Hi.
Hi.
Nahang bhikkhave anang ekadammanti, samanupasami yo evam satdamasa samosaya antaradanaya samvatati yatayidam bhikkhave kosajang bhikkhave sadamasa samosaya antaradanaya samvatati.
Good.
I've got it down as O monk, I do not perceive another one thing also, that which
Thus.
thus
And then go right to the
leads
verb. Very good.
to the confusion,
Okay.
to the disappearance
Yes.
of the true doctrine,
Mm-hmm.
namely, O monks, idleness or indolence.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah. Idleness or indolence, O monk, leads to the confusion, to the disappearance of the true doctrine.
Very good. Thank you. Well done.
Thank you.
Okay. So, kosajang, idleness, indolence, perhaps even just laziness, lying around. That is right. And here we have another similar one. Virya Rambo. Virya Arambo. Diane, can you tell us briefly, can you just explain this compound, Virya Rambo?
Yes, I will try.
Just
The
to make sure we
virya
all know what it
part-
means.
The
The Virya, we know.
part is energy,
Yes.
and the rumba comes from arabati, the
That's
verb,
right.
which means to begin or start or arouse. So this is to arouse energy.
Yeah, it's a combination of Virya and Aramba. So the A is actually in the other piece of the compound as well. Virya and Aramba, which is a sort of a noun form, I guess, of the verb arabati, to arise, to give birth to, not literally. So yes, the arousal of energy. Very good. And everything else is pretty much the same. I think we can move on. Here we have one that's a little more fleshed out, a little slightly more complicated. Maybe I'll start this one myself, just to make sure, because there's a lot going on here. And I've put a few sort of markers to help us. Nahang bhikkhave anyang ekadamang pi samanupasami yo evang sadamasa samosaya antaradanaya sangvatati yata idang bhikkhave anuyogo akusalanang dhamanang anuyogo kusalanang dhamanang. So here, a little different, but it starts pretty much the same way. Monks, I don't perceive any other one thing that thus leads to the disappearance and the confusion of the true doctrine, namely, O monks, anuyogo, the practice of, so here genitive plural, and the subject is dhamanang, modified by Kusalanam, the practice of unwholesome dhammas, the unwholesome mental states. And I've put an and, I think we need to put that in for English, and the anuyogo of the non-practice, the not practicing of wholesome dhammas. So notice here this word anuyogo. You might at first glance think, oh, I see it must be a negative thing. But in fact, this word is anu, which is a common Pali prefix, and yogo, or yoga. And when it's negated, we have anu yogo. So that's how that word should be properly divided up. And I'm going to talk in just a moment about the dictionary, looking words up. I thought we could look that up because it's kind of a good way to practice looking at things in the dictionary. And so here we have the practice, this is a noun, anuyogo, O monks, of unwholesome dhammas and the non-practice of wholesome dhammas leads to, here's our verb in red, the disappearance and confusion of the true Dhamma, or the true doctrine. So that is my translation of 118. And now I think I'll try a person with a blue hand to do the very same sentence so you can hear it one more time. So I think we have Pat here. Pat, are you there?
Hi.
Hi. Can you do for us one more time, read and then translate 118, please?
Okay. So Nahang bhikkhave anyang ekadammang bhi samana pasami yo evang saddhamasa samosaya antaradhanaya sampatati yata idam bhikkhave anuyogo salanam namanam. Stop. Well, let's go for the gold. Ananu yogo kusalanam dhamanam.
Okay, good.
And I went to the dentist today. So I don't, monks, perceive samanupasami, any other thing that thus leads to the disappearance and confusion of the true Dhamma, that is to say, monks, the practice of unwholesome doctrines.
Okay. Not really
right?
doctrines, I would say. This is really referring to mental qualities, not a whole body of teaching.
Oh, okay. So, yeah, okay. Just got to learn the context of that word.
Yes, it's a good point.
Yeah. Okay, so thanks. So, ananu yoga kusalanam dhammanam would be the non-practice of wholesome dhammas.
Right. So we have to practice.
Sorry, yeah.
No, you're right. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to. So I guess in this case, it's I'm sorry. What was the word you used? Was teachings?
Doctrine.
Doctrine.
Yes, that's a good point. That in the same sentence, the word Dhamma seems to require. Well, here, no, not this one. Sorry, this one is the same. The wholesome mental qualities, but here, sadhammasa. This part of Dhamma is a different sense, but it is compounded with sad, so it hopefully won't be completely confusing. But as we've said, and you bring up a good point, that the word Dhamma has a large range of meaning, and in the beginning, I mean, this is kind of like the fourth foundation of mindfulness of Dhammas. We've talked about Chitta earlier, the mind. That would be perhaps the third foundation. And here we're talking about the fourth foundation of mindfulness of Dhammas, mental states, things that arise in the mind. And that's what you have translated so far, I believe it's what is being talked about here. But only at the very end, in this sort of summarizing sentence, is the whole teaching of the Buddha being referred to as the Saddhamma. So does that make it more clear?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Okay, good. So why don't you translate for us just the second sentence?
Okay, so the practice amongst of unwholesome, sorry,
Dhammas.
case it's dhammas, okay,
That's fine.
or the non-practice of wholesome dhammas lead to the disappearance and confusion of the true dhamma, the true teaching.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So that is a second round of translation. I hope this is clear. And that is the first part of our further readings. And before we go to our second set of readings, I just wanted to do a quick discussion sidebar about using the dictionary, which is a very important thing to do if you are a student of Pali. And I wanted to mention two dictionaries. And so, let me see here. So the first dictionary to mention to you, to tell you about, and I have to sort of almost apologize that I'm really referring to English language references. And I understand that many of you, English is not your first language, but that's sort of my frame of reference for Pali. And so the Pali Text Society, which was started in the late 1800s in England by a man named Rhys Davids, sort of commissioned and helped write a Pali dictionary, which came out in the 1920s, which makes it about 100 years old. And you might think, well, how could a dictionary 100 years old be good? But the truth is, it's actually a pretty good dictionary. And if you're a person like me attached to material objects, you'll actually have the physical dictionary, which I like, because then I could sort of annotate it myself. But there's no need today in our modern world to have a physical copy of this dictionary, and perhaps there are advantages to having the online version, because you can directly search for words without having to flip through pages, and if you're not quite sure of your alphabetical order, you get an easy off. I should also mention, as sort of an aside, that there is a new set of a new dictionary that the Pali Text Society is currently making, which is this one, which is to differentiate. So there's what I call the dictionary, which is the Pali English Dictionary. But to differentiate that, the Pali Text Society calls this the Dictionary of Pali, which sounds a little similar, right? So one is called the PED, the Pali English Dictionary. That's this older one I've been talking about it. But there's this new one called the DOP, the Dictionary of Pali, which is being done by a woman in Cambridge named Margaret Cohn. And I've actually found out that just a few weeks ago, the third of four volumes has been released by the Pali Text Society. I'm not sure what letter she's up to. This is just simply the first. I have the second. So this only gets us from A to, I think, K, which of course is not that far in the Pali way of thinking. But there's no need for one to worry about that dictionary, because the Pali English Dictionary, the old dictionary, will get you very far. And we're very fortunate that the University of Chicago has many dictionaries of South Asia online digitized, which is not just scanned, but actually digitized. So in this page, perhaps you can see all these languages that they offer English to translate to this other language. So there's Marathi, Nepali, Kannada, Hindi, Bengali, many. And of course, the Pali is our dictionary, which is this one. And so all we need to do is put in a word, and hopefully a word will come up. But I should mention that there's a lot of abbreviations in this dictionary that might seem confusing if you don't have the paper copy, but there's no need to worry, because there's this button here that says front matter. And if you click on it, and you get the forward, but then you also can choose list of abbreviations. And we won't really talk about it now, but here are all these complicated abbreviations explained. And so it's important to look these up, and I get confused too. there's certain things that are slightly confusing about the dictionary. For instance, what we've been calling the absolutive, they called back then the more confusing term gerund, and that is abbreviated as G-E-N. G-E-R. But there's another word in Pali which refers to what's called the future passive participle, which has another word called the gerundive. It means the same, and that's abbreviated as GRD. And I'm constantly confused by GER and GRD, and I'm just putting it out there, so perhaps you'll be confused less than I. And you can always refer to this front matter kind of piece. So, for instance, if I was not sure with what the word anuyogo meant, well, the first thing I would need to know is that I need to put that word in the sort of dictionary form, the uninflected form, which is anuyoga. And notice the handy autocomplete if we're not quite sure how to spell it. And we get 4 possibilities, and we can view the entry either by entry alone or the page upon which the entry is on. And it's here, but for revision, I'll make this bigger. Maybe I could make this whole thing bigger for us. And so here we see anuyoga, which explains to us that it's from this combination of the prefix anu plus the root yuj, which is the root of the word yoga. And it means application, devotion to, execution, practice of, and that's how we've been using it, the practice of. You might have wondered, why is this word yoga? Because isn't yoga meaning yoked? Isn't that what we talked about? And so I'll just also show you the entry for yoga, which is interesting. So I'll just put yoga in and see what happens. Notice that the options are listed in Pali order. So I have my vowels, K, T, D, N, and way here, Y, yoga, page 559. And so here we have a very long, big, I can't even fit it on my screen, entry for yoga. It's a big concept. And we'll take a quick look at it. The first thing that I need to tell you is don't be repelled by this. Don't worry. So yoga, the first meaning, literally yoking or being yoked. As I've said, the word yoga and yoked is a synonym. It's something English and Pali and Sanskrit share. But there's actually sort of a different meaning or other meaning, which I think perhaps is an older meaning, or perhaps more fundamental meaning of yoga, which has the sense almost of work. And so if I can find it here. I've highlighted it. So this other one is application, endeavor, undertaking, and effort. That's another meaning of yoga. And the prefix anu has the sense of going along with. In fact, if one recites, for instance, dependent origination, one can say to recite it in the forwards order or the backwards order. And the words for that are anuloma and patiloma. The word loma actually means the hairs of the body. Unlike in English, Pali is more sophisticated in a way where the head hairs and the body hairs have completely different words. So head hair is kesa, but body hair, like on the arm, is loma. So anuloma would be along the way the hair grows. And then pati has the sense of going back, and that's sort of like against the grain. So those are the literal senses of anuloma and patiloma, but they have the more normal sense of forwards and backwards order. And in this case, I'm giving for dependent origination. But here, coming back to our dictionary for yoga, we see here lots of information. So here, DHA means the Dhammapada Atthakatha, which is the commentary for the Dhammapada. And this is the Pali Text Society way of notating books, which is in volume numbers and then page numbers, which is a little tricky because we don't do that so much today. So for instance, here we see S2 131. That would be Samyutta Nikaya, second volume, page 131. Anguttara Nikaya, second volume, page 93. So somewhere out there online, there's a converter that you can find to convert your Pali Text Society page references to more normal ways of referring to the canon, like the Sixth Council. And so notice here it's in the, so what it's telling us here, which is interesting, is that the commentary equates yoga with samapadana, which means right striving. And then it gives an example, yogang karoti, to make an effort to strive after. And then it has this another example, asavanang kayaya yoga karaniya. So the Y period is standing for yoga. So that means one should do yoga. One should make an effort. Asavanang kayaya. And so perhaps you recognize this as our genitive dative plural for the destruction of the asavas. So that is a quick way, a quick overview of using the dictionary. I hope it's of some help to you. And as I've mentioned, it can be at first a little bit overwhelming, but I think once you get used to looking at it, it becomes less overwhelming. I want to mention one more reference, which is this website called polydictionary.appspot.com, which is a sort of macro search amongst various dictionaries. So for instance, if I put the word dukkha, which has all these nice autocomplete choices, I get lots of things. First of all, I can get the entry on dukkha from Jnanatiloka. And I can get the short entry from the Concise Pali English Dictionary. And then I could also get the full PTS entry. So perhaps we don't even need the other one because the PTS entry is included in this macro search. And what might also be of interest to some of you is other language dictionaries. So here we have these languages, and even we have some Vietnamese, and we have some Burmese. This is the Pali Myanmar dictionary. And so this is also a very valuable website for people to use. This again is at polydictionary.appspot.com. I hope you can find that. Diane, if you're there, are there any other tips or things you'd like to share about your experiences of using online dictionaries or not online?
Well, I always had to keep the alphabet right in front of me when I was looking up any word because I couldn't remember. I had to go very slowly, and if there were any apostrophes, like C apostrophe Ava, don't try to look up that word.
Right. One has to learn how to properly separate their compounds. So, because not all compounds will be listed, so we have to look them up as their constituent parts. And so when we see cheva, we sort of have to know that we're looking at ch plus ava, right?
And then the letter I was talking about earlier with you, the M with a dot under it, I would always have trouble finding that word.
Yes.
I had to look up S-A-N instead of S-A-M. S-A-Eng.
Yes, this character, eng. Yeah, it's another challenge. So one really needs to have the ability to enter the diacritical marks with their keyboard. That would really help. But here on this website, you could actually sort of copy and paste them. They're presented for you. But yes, the Pali English Dictionary, the old dictionary, uses the eng character to represent the Nigahita, not M with a dot below as we've been doing in this class. And so one has to know that too. Okay. All right, thank you, Diane. Are there any questions from the YouTube people I need to know about?
There was something, wait a minute. Well, I don't know. Someone wants to know if they can get, they say, these books in regional languages of India, like the Pali Primer and the Gare and Karuna Tilaka book. Have they been translated in other languages? Do you know?
I believe Pali Primer has been translated at least into Marathi and Russian and Chinese, but I don't know where one would find them. I think if one looks at that VRI website, which we have been, one can find some options there. But I think Google is our friend in this case.
And one person says, and while I can't address Stephen's query about the sound of Bengali, I can attest that Pali sounds exactly like Marathi and shares the alphabet.
Yes, it is, I think, the case for several Indian languages. Right. Okay. Thank you. Okay, let's look now at our second group of readings. So maybe before I do anything, I wanted to discuss or address this, what's called an idiom of these three words, chittang paryadaya titati. So an idiom means that if we translate this phrase literally, it doesn't make so much great sense. But we have to sort of substitute something in English to capture the sense of it. But just taking the pieces individually first, chitta is the mind. Paryadaya is actually an absolutive of a verb which is sort of not used as a verb itself. We find it as this absolutive, paryadaya, having overpowered. So notice I'm saying having overpowered. It should tip us off that we're talking about an absolutive. And titati, the verb we know, stands. And I have this little piece of snippet of footnote from Venerable Bodhi from his translation of the numerical discourses. And so this is his note of this very phrase to this very book. And here he says this, I hope you can see. Here and elsewhere, I render the Pali idiom chittang paryadaya titati simply as it obsesses the mind. So that's how he's rendering this idiom. It obsesses the mind. And helpfully, he also tells us, literally, it would be rendered having overcome the mind. So that is paryadaya, having overcome chittang, the mind. It remains there. So here he's translating titati as remain, because as I've said, the most literal sense of titati is the stand, but it has many more nuances of meaning. And so this Dhamma, this thing in the mind, overcomes it and stays there. And I think we all know what that means. When something kind of just obsesses the mind, we can't stop thinking about it. So chittang paryadaya titati, it obsesses the mind. And literally it would mean having overcome the mind, it remains there. So look how wonderful the Buddha was at explaining these things that are happening to our minds today, so precisely and so au courant. So here, Nahang bhikkhave anyang ekarupang pi samanupasami yang evang purisassa chittang paryadaya titati yataidang bhikkhave iti rupang. Iti rupang bhikkhave purisassa chittang paryadaya titati. So, monks, I do not perceive any other one form, rupa, that which thus overpowers the mind, obsesses the mind, than of a man, purisassa, namely, iti rupang, the form of a woman. The form of a woman, monks, obsesses the mind of a man. But if you're a woman and you're thinking, wait, this sounds kind of sexist, please don't panic. And if you are obsessing, if you are being perturbed, I could tell you didn't do your homework, because the subsequent ones, we flip it to the other way. And so don't worry. So maybe we don't have to do all of these, because as I've said, they're kind of vocabulary builders and they're all following the same pattern. But I would like to have maybe just a few hands so we can do some of these together. And so I see we have Shirosha. Would you?
Hello.
Hi, how are you?
Hi, I'm good. Thank you.
Let's.
Which
Sorry.
one do you want?
Would you mind
sorry.
doing for me number 6?
So is it the
sixth one.
With the number 6 written on it? Yes. Okay.
Or yeah.
So shall I just read it out first?
Please read it first.
All right. Naham bhikkave anyam eka rupampi samanupassami yamevam itya chittam paryadaya tittati yata idam bhikkave purisa rupam bhikkave itya chittam paryadaya tittati.
Mm-hmm.
So I do not, O monks, samanupasami, perceive anyam ekarupam p. So any other single form.
Good.
Which yam evam itya chittam paryadaya tittati, which thus possesses
Okay.
or overcomes
Okay.
a woman's mind. So itya chittam would be a woman's mind.
That's right.
And remains or persists, I guess. So tittati would be so that the obsession persists, I guess.
Exactly. And what is that? The one thing.
The single form, right?
Well, not exactly. Purisa rupang.
Oh yes, the Purisa Rupam, yes. Yata is so namely Bhikkave Purisa Rupam, the form of a man.
Exactly.
So a Purisa Rupam Bhikkave Itya Chittam Paryadaya Tittati. A man's form, O monks, having overcome a woman's mind, remains or stays.
Yes.
Obsession.
Very good. Good. That's fine. Yes. Very nice job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. And then I'll take Fiatra. I'm not sure, by the way, I hope I'm pronouncing your name close to correctly.
Yes, well, it's actually Fiacra with a hard C.
Fiacra. I apologize. I should have asked you several times ago.
Oh, that's fine. I didn't want to waste time on it.
Fiacra. Okay. Would you mind doing the one right above number 6, which I guess would be number 5?
Okay. Great. Naham bhikkave anyang ekapotabam pi samanupasami yang evam purisasa chitang pariyadaya titati yatayidam bhikkave ito potabam.
Iti potabang.
Iti potabang.
Yes.
Iti potabang bhikkave purisasa chitang pariyadaya titati.
Mm.
Okay, so I do not perceive any other touch which having overcome a man's mind remains, other than namely the touch of a woman. The touch of a woman overcomes a man's mind and remains.
Yes, very good. Thank you. Okay, let's try another one. We have Uyen.
Yes.
Hi. Would you mind doing for us number 7?
Oh,
That's having eka saddang.
Saddang. Oh, what does it mean? Sorry. Nahang bikave annang eva saddang ti manupassami yam evang itya chittang pariyadaya titati yatadiyang bikave purisasado bikave itya chittang pariyadaya titati.
Mm-hmm.
All monks, I do not perceive any other
What is a saddha?
one sound
Very good.
which does overcome human's mind, namely all monks, a man's sound.
Right. The sound of a man, or perhaps maybe it would even be in the voice of a man.
Yeah, the voice of the man. All monks overcome the woman's mind and remains there.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, maybe just quickly a couple more. We have Ernst.
Hello.
Hi. Would you do for us the third one, I think it is, which is eka gandang. And
Yes. Naham bhikkhave anyam ekagandham pi samanupasami yam evam purisassa chittam pariyadaya tittati yathayidam bhikkhave ithigandho bhikkhave purisassa chittam pariyadaya tittati iti.
very nice.
Thanks. So, O bhikkhus, I cannot perceive any other odor.
Or scent. Yeah,
Scent.
fine. Either one.
Yeah. That obsesses the mind. That obsesses the mind of a man.
Good, that's the genitive.
Mm-hmm. Namely, bhikkhave, O bhikkhus, the odor of a woman.
Okay.
The odor of a woman, bhikkhave, obsesses the mind of a man.
Right, the scent of a woman. I'm reminded of a story I once read about Napoleon, the famous Frenchman Napoleon, and he was out in the field doing his military campaign, and he wrote back to his Josephine that I'll be back in a couple weeks. Don't wash. So, anyway, that's rather an aside. Maybe we'll take just one more. We can have Linda do one for us. Linda, are you there?
Hi, Stephen. Oh,
Hi. So,
Hi.
would you do for us perhaps the very last one, the number 10?
Nahang
Sorry.
bhikkhave anyang eka pottabang pi samanupassami yang ewang itya chittang pariyadaya tittati yatha idang bhikkhave purisapottabang bhikkhave itya chittang pariyadaya tittati. So I do not see, O monks, any other pottabang. I think
It's the touch.
I do not see, O monk, any other. I do not perceive any other touch that obsess the mind of the woman. That is to say, O monks, is the touch of a man. The touch of a man, O monks, obsess the mind of a woman and me.
Right.
Yeah.
overpowers the mind and remains, or we can just say obsesses the mind. Right, either one is fine. Thank you. That's good.
Stephen, can I
Yes.
ask a short question?
Okay.
It's about the N with a dot on the top and the N with the dot on the bottom.
Okay.
How do you,
Yeah.
what is the difference?
What's the difference? Yeah, I'll tell you. The difference is nothing. The difference is nothing. And since we're finished with this further, I was just going to point out this very nice graphic of our reading from the beginning of Dhammapada, which is the next chapter. I wonder if I can make this bigger. No. I hope you can see it. But perhaps here you can see in the second line we have the word kichang, which is an accusative. No, it's not accusative. It's a nominative neuter, I believe. And it's notated with the dot above. And so it's yet another way of notating the Nigahita. So we've seen M with the dot below. We've seen the eng character with that thing that looks like an N with the G together. And another way, yet another way, is using M with a dot above. But they are all exactly the same. And they're pronounced exactly the same. It's just I guess it's a preference, what people like. There's no official way. And so this is the first thing we'll take next week. I should just point out, it seemed a little confusing to me when I first looked at it, but if you have your Giảng Krunatilaka book, I can tell you that at the beginning of lesson 2, there are in fact 2 different Dhamma, or 3. There are 3 different Dhammapada verses. Let me see if I'll pull up my file. There are 3. So here, these are the initial. So the first 2 are coming from Buddha Vaggo in Dhammapada 182 and 183. So you can look that up. But the third one is from a different part of the book entirely. That's from the beginning of the book, the Yamaka Vagga. That is the pairs, and that's the 5th. And so that's how we're going to start our class on next week, which will be the 9th of 10th. And we're going to not going to take everything exactly in order in lesson 2. I'm going to skip around just a little bit, but just please have a look at these Dhammapada verses for next week. And I think we're pretty much at the end here. And I think my friend Regina would like to make some announcements if she's there. And I also should
make some announcements. Yes, thank you so much, Stephen.
You're welcome. What are your announcements?
My announcements are, first of all, hello everyone. I have an announcement regarding further study with the Venerable Bhikkhu Bodhi, and I want to invite you all. He teaches sutta study every Saturday. Meditation begins at 9:30, and then the discussion of the text begins at 10:10 and lasts for about an hour. He is currently teaching the Anguttara Nikaya. I believe it's the Book of Fours, and I am going to go ahead and put the link. I can't do a chat. All right, well, you can check out the baus.org website, and there you may also, if you like, donate an offer of dana for perhaps the great, fabulous education that you've been getting free of charge with Stephen Sas. And again, the website is baus.org. And I would also like to invite you all, if you've enjoyed learning from Stephen. Stephen is involved with an organization called Sutta and the City, based here in New York City. And I actually teach with Stephen. We work together looking at the various suttas. This is, we look at it and we try to apply all of the lessons to our modern life. And you can learn more about Sutta and the City by going to suttaandthecity.com. And we have a really exciting sutta coming up this Thursday, which is tomorrow. And by the way, our classes are from 7 to 7:45. So
I should mention that all these times are Eastern
Standard Time. We're in New York City.
New York time, right. Thank you, Regina.
You're so welcome. But we would love for you to join us. And once again, that website is suttaandthecity.com.
Okay, great.
That'll do it for tonight.
Thank you. Well, thank you all very much for your attention and all your hard work. I hope this has been worth your time. And I hope to have you all come back next week for our final week of Summer Pali Intensive, classes 9 and 10, where we'll be looking at Ger and Kunatilaka Lesson 2. So thank you all very much. And always check the BAUS website Pali page for any new postings. I hope to put up the my file of the readings, and if anything else comes up, always go to our website or that website. Thank you very much. Have a great day and happy Pali. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you, Stephen.
You're very welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye now.
Thank you.
Bye.